What is up, YouTube? Welcome to episode 1 of the Battle Royale guide. In episode 0, we talked about the things that you should do before even jumping into your first Battle Royale game. It's mostly targeted at newer players, but I'm sure even some of the advanced players out there will learn a thing or two from the first video. So definitely, if you haven't seen that, go and check it out. Now, to jump right into it, what are we talking about? We're talking about parachuting. And to start off with, we're going to be talking about pulling early, which is what I would recommend for most people to do. Pretty much everybody to do. If you're a new player, pulling early is the way to go. Why is that the thing? For one, when you pull early, you're able to get further away from people. You're not having to compete for people for gear. You're not having to risk it early, risking early death. Early deaths, if you're going for Battle Royale leaderboards, if you're trying to rank up, early deaths are an absolute killer of your ranking, man. You'll drop so far from those. It's just a risk you don't need to take. Most of the time when people drop low, they don't even know why they're dropping low. They drop low into forests, into open fields where there's no roads, there's no cars, there's no gear. It's just a bad idea. They're going to be running late to flip in most places. But the advantages to pulling early are you can float really far away from people. You're not taking a risk early of dying. By the time you hit the ground, there's already maybe probably like 10 people dead in most games. You're not having to compete for gear. You're able to float away, look for vehicles, get vehicles, and make it to the best loot spots on the map where you're not, once again, you're not competing right off the bat. There's no reason to. On almost every single map, there's enough gear that you can go and float away, and you're going to get to plenty of loot that's not going to be touched by anyone else the whole game. It's just going to be your loot. You get to take it. You don't have to worry about some guy coming up and shooting you in the back. You don't have to worry about finding a gun or trying to find armor or trying to find all the stuff that you need right at the start so that you can win fights against people. Because basically when you drop early, that's exactly what you're doing. You're just making it so that you get into fights sooner when you really don't need to do that. The other thing about pulling early and floating away is for the rest of the game, there's not going to be that many people next to you. So you can follow the circle in. And towards the end game, you're going to be able to make it further just from that. Like the people that all pull together, they're going to be all clumped up. They're going to be fighting each other from the start, and for the rest of the game, there's going to be tons of guys right next to them. When pulling early, floating away from people, you're getting away from everybody. You're able to get a car. You're able to get to gear a lot easier. It's just a better overall option. Definitely, if anyone's new to the game, I would recommend pulling early, float away from people, try to get to the best possible loot that you can. It's just a better option. Now, let's go into talking once again about dropping low and why it's not good. For one, a lot of people don't know how to drop low. A lot of people don't know when to drop low. Better players in the game do drop low, but they know that they're taking a risk when doing that, and most of them are very flipping good at the game. So they know that if they're dropping low, that normally they can get themselves out of that situation. But more often than not, it's a giant gamble to drop low with not much reward. The reason it's a giant gamble to drop low is, for one, you're going down, you're dropping, there's going to be a shitload of other guys dropping next to you. As you can see in the video right here, look at all these guys dropping next to me. We're going yellow at Air Station Mike. And so there's just tons of people there. There's tons of people to compete for gear, and if you don't get gear early, you're basically just screwed. There's nothing you can do about it if you don't get gear early. On maps like Stratus especially, even maps on Basata where loot's everywhere, people are going to be so spread out that you're not going to be able to get to the gear. As you can see here, I land, my guy falls down, this other guy gets in the building before me, he goes in, grabs a gun, I'm like, okay, I'm going to run for the tower, but then I get to the tower and there's already a guy in the tower. It just causes so much problems where if I would have pulled early, I could have floated away from everybody and I would have been guaranteed a chance to get gear. And not only that, all these people that dropped low would have been dead by the time I hit the ground. That's the other thing, is that people that drop low, they die super quick. Everybody that beats them to the gear, everyone's just running around like you can see me right now, like chickens with their head cut off, and they're running into other players, they're getting gunned down when they have no chance of fighting back, they don't have a gun. It's just, you're competing for gear, you're competing right off the start when there's no real reason for it. On almost every map you can pull early, get away from people, get to gear that's not going to be touched by anybody else. There's really no reason to drop low. The only times where dropping low is effective is if every single other person pulls early. That's why in the Battle Royale tournament you can see, if you're watching like Sergio, some other players, that did drop low, the thing about the Battle Royale tourney is it's a ton of good players. They know that pulling early is what's the best plan. It's going to give you the best chances, your best odds. So if a lot of people pull early, you know, like 90% of the players pull early, then pulling low then isn't that bad of a plan. But the thing is, in just regular old games, a lot of the time, the players that you're pulling, the players that are there's so many players that are going to open late. I don't know what it is. I think it might be because maybe Lyric plays and he likes to low drop, or maybe people just really like to get into the fight right at the start, but more often than not, it's a bad plan. You're going to be playing lobby simulator most of the time. You're just going to get into the game. You're going to drop low. You're not going to get loot right at the start, and you're going to get killed. It's just not a risk that you need to take. If you just pull early, float further away, you normally will work out better for you. I would say like 99% of the time, it's going to work out good if you pull early and float away. Alright, so let's get into this, and let's talk about some drops. I want to give you guys some examples of things you can do when pulling early. Maybe even an example of a time where you might want to pull late. So, here, let's start off this. So the plane's coming in, right? Imagine that my marker is the plane right here on the screen. Imagine that the black circle is right in this area right here. You know, this is a very common black circle. On Altus, if you don't know, black circle is the play zone. So this would be the play area. This is very, very common. A very common black zone right here. So imagine that's the black zone. Imagine the plane's coming in, and it's flying across this way, and it starts dropping players right here. And it keeps going, dropping, and it ends up dropping the rest of its players at the end of this. So they've all been dropped along this angle. So if you were dropped first, in the first part of the plane, you pull early. Where can you go? Okay, if you pull early, if you're dropped in the first part of the plane, you want to be getting away from the other players. So the rest of the players are to the east of you. So you want to go somewhat to the west, maybe to the south, even to the north. Now in this situation, there's not much in the north, right? But if you get dropped right here, you could go to Galati. You could go to Arena. You could go down to a Geos Dionysus. You could go down towards Laka Military. You could go anywhere in this area, right? That's where you should be parachuting to. While you're parachuting, look for a vehicle. If you can get a vehicle, then you can grab the vehicle. Say you're parachuting, right? You're parachuting this way. Say you find a vehicle on the road over here. You could take that. You could drive down. You could drive to the main road. You could drive down here. You could drive all the way down to Niachori, and then you can loot Niachori all to yourself. This giant city. If you get a vehicle and you're able to drive that far, there's really no one else other than other people that are going to get a vehicle, and then they would have to choose to drive to Niachori that you're going to have to compete with. So most likely, you're going to drive to Niachori, and you're going to have that town all to yourself. There might be a chance that one other guy pulls in with a vehicle, and then you only have to compete against that one other person for gear, where if you would have pulled late, say you were somewhere and you pulled late above Aethera, you're competing against probably like another 15 guys in Aethera. So your odds aren't good. Your odds are very bad in that situation. So say you got dropped early, you could float this direction, right? These are the areas that you'd want to be going for. You want to be going away from the rest of the people. If you get dropped in the middle, somewhere in the middle, then you're either going to go straight north or straight south. If you get dropped in the middle, if you immediately pull your parachute and go straight south, you're going to be the first one to make it to the south. You're going to be able to get a vehicle. You're going to maybe even be able to grab a vehicle, get to the military down here. You go down to the power plant area. You go down to Stavros. You have more options when pulling early and floating away from players. And most of the time, a lot of people aren't going to go the same direction as you. They're all going to spread out as well. So there's only going to be like a few guys next to you when you pull early. So say you were in the drop at the end. Now, you could drop into Aethera. That is an option. But it's probably a bad option because, like I said, you're going to be competing against all these other people that are dropping late or pulling late. Especially when the plane is coming in from east to west in this situation. Everybody, if you don't know, if you haven't noticed this, when the plane drops people, it's not like you get dropped out of the plane and you fall directly straight to the ground. You get chucked in the direction that the plane is going. So everybody that's coming in is all getting thrown towards Aethera. So that's even more people that are going to get thrown in towards Aethera. There's going to be so many people in this area. So if you get dropped late and you pull early, not only are a lot of people probably going to drop into Aethera, so that's going to reduce a lot of the people by you, but then you could float down to Gravia. You could float to the barracks area, the military area over here. You could get a vehicle. You could drive to Talos. You could drive to Talos military. There's so many options, so many more options that you're going to be able to get away from people and get better gear. Now, let's give a different scenario. I had this circle yesterday. Circle up here. The black circle extended all the way up. It went down around Oreo Castro. Came down around through here, went across by Sirta and Abdera. And then it came back up here. So it was only Oreo Castro in, Abdera, and Sirta. Now, this is a situation where it's probably not going to be a bad idea to drop early. Where this is what happened. The plane was flying up in this direction, right? Started dropping people, kept dropping people, and then stopped dropping people about right here. So it banked up around Oreo Castro. I got dropped right about here, so it threw me towards Oreo Castro. So in that circumstance, I knew that I was going to be able to land in Oreo Castro, be one of the first ones there, and I was going to probably be able to get enough gear and a gun early that I'd be able to fight off anybody else that was dropping in. Now, that was a circumstance where it was definitely risky to do that, because there's going to be a lot of people doing it as well. But I knew I was going to be able to land there and get there first. Now, say if you got dropped right here, past Oreo Castro, when the plane's flying this way, you're going to get thrown out away. If you pull late in that situation, you're going to be super far away from Oreo Castro, and all the guys that got dropped this way and are thrown into Oreo Castro are all going to be in the city before you. So you would have to pull late, float back, run into Oreo Castro when people are already looting it. Your odds are not good. That's one of the another reasons that it's not good to drop late, is people don't know when to drop late. If you're getting thrown out of the city and more people are getting thrown into it, and you're going to try to run back into it, that's a really bad idea. So basically, these people, their only option was to pull early, and they would have to float towards Abdera and Sirta. If you can float that way, you can make it to just right here and then run the rest of the distance. That's a better odds, and more likely a lot of people aren't willing to do that. So you'd still probably be able to get to Abdera or Sirta and be, well, you know, one of like 3 to 4 people there. So your odds are better to float further away in that situation. So that's a time where it might be a good idea to drop low. But when you get into games, a lot of the time what I see is like a drop will be happening out here in the middle of nowhere. There's literally like maybe 3 buildings out in this forest. You know, there's like one here, one there. So few buildings you can't even see them. You're gonna find maybe a handgun if you're lucky. So I'll see the plane flying in this direction over the map. People will get dropped, and there will be like 30 guys that low drop. It makes no damn sense. I don't ever understand why people are doing it, but people do it. It's a bad idea to low drop. Don't come into Battle Royale and low drop. Pull early. It's going to be so much better. You're going to have such a better time doing that. Now we're on Basata. So we're going to talk about Basata dropping. So basically always the best plan on Basata, I would say, is to always pull early. Once again, there's no reason to ever pull late on Basata. If you look at this map, there is literally tons of loot everywhere. You have the mill base. You have another military base down here. You have a city down here. You have houses everywhere in the center. Just houses upon houses everywhere. On the far side, you got Marquez. You got this other town. You've got the communication tower. You've got buildings all along the coastline. You've got the stone quarry with the factory, which has a bunch of buildings in it. You got these 2 military bases down here with tons of buildings. There's even little houses out along the coastline on this side. So, like, if you look across the whole map, there's just loot everywhere. So, what happens is that usually on Basata, this happens the most on Basata, is that a ton of people drop low. And it doesn't make any sense. The reason they do it is because they're probably almost always guaranteed loot, and they can get into a quick death match. So say the plane's flying in this way, right? And people are getting dropped. There's going to be people all around down here. If you drop low, you're going to be competing with at least, you know, probably like 20 other guys. There's going to be like 20 other guys that drop low. So if you pull early, say the plane's coming this way. Say you got dropped in the very first. You could go back down towards this town. You could go towards this military base. You could float west and go towards the giant air base. You could go to these houses over here. If you get dropped in the center, you could go down this way. There's houses all along this area. You could get a vehicle. You could go to the stone quarry. You could go to these 2 military bases. You could get a vehicle. You could go down here. If you get dropped in the very latest, you could go up to the communication tower, which is a bunch of military loot. You could go to the factory. You could float all the way to this town. You could float and go into Marquez, where there's just tons of loot, and you're not going to compete against nearly as many people. Almost always, there's never really a single reason that you would ever need to drop low on Basata. Not a single one that I can think of. I would always pull early unless you're just going YOLO. You want to have some fun right at the start. I would always recommend pulling early on Basata. Now let's talk about Stratus. So Stratus, by the way, in this, I'm just talking about basically the 3 main maps, which are Stratus, Altus, and Basata. Those are the main maps being played right now. I'm not going to talk about Tanoa. Tanoa is very similar to Altus. You probably can almost always pull early, and you're better off, especially since you're going to be dropping into the jungle. Wake Island, it's a totally different scenario. They have predetermined spawns. You can't even bring Wake into the discussion in this. So, basically, on Stratus, you're almost always going to get dropped by Air Station Mike. You're either going to get dropped coming in towards Old Outpost this way. You're going to get dropped coming towards Air Station Mike this way. You're going to get dropped down around here. Never pull late on Stratus. There's almost no reason to ever. This is the most important map to pull early and to go the way that you are furthest away from people. This is the most important map. If you don't do that, you're not going to be getting gear. If you drop low, there's going to be like 20 other guys fighting for a station Mike. There's going to be like 10 other guys going for a single barrack at Old Outpost. If you pull early, okay, say the plane's coming in this direction, right? Air Station Mike, and you get dropped coming in this direction, you get dropped first. Where can you go? You can go to Camp Tempest. You can turn around, you can go to Girna. You could go for Maxwell. You could go down here to the south, get a vehicle. You could go and loot the outskirt buildings on the bottom side of Stratus. Say you get dropped in the middle. You could go, once again, maybe towards Maxwell. You could go down. You could drop at this house, get vehicles, and go down towards the outskirt buildings as well. You could go north. You could work your way towards the tower. You could work your way towards the quarry, the ravine right here. Grab a vehicle and go into Aegea Marina. You could go up towards this tower. There's a tower right here, another military tower. You could get a vehicle. You could go towards the airbase. You have options. You need to take your best option in these situations. You want to get away from as many people as possible so that you give yourself a better chance of getting gear. There's not that much loot on Stratus. That's why it's a very good idea to try to get away from as many people as possible so you don't have to compete for gear. You need to be the first ones, or trying to be the first ones to these areas so that you can guarantee yourself loot. So say you get dropped last, past Air Station Mike. What can you do? You could go up to Camino firing range. There's a ton of loot there. You could go towards this tower. You could work this way and get a vehicle and go to Rogaine. You could even work that way, get a vehicle, and drive around to the top side of Aegea. There's a lot of options. Well, there's not a lot of options, but you almost always have an option that's going to make it so that you get gear early and you're not going to have to compete against others for loot. Because a lot of the time, people are dropping low on Stratus. But yeah, that is going to basically conclude the guide on parachuting. Leave comments in the chat if you got any questions, if you have any comments on the video. I will try to answer anybody's questions. But yo guys, thank you guys for watching. Catch you guys in the next video. If you guys enjoyed the video or you found the video helpful, make sure to leave a thumbs up. Subscribe for future content. I've got more videos coming out, including more weekly highlights, more Arma highlights, more game highlights, and more Battle Royale guides. Catch you guys in the next video. Thank you guys for watching.